At the height of the 1950s, when rock and roll was shaking the world and Hollywood was shining brighter than ever, a quiet love story unfolded behind the scenes of the film Love Me Tender. The young star of that film was Elvis Presley, already becoming a cultural storm across America. His co-star was the beautiful and mysterious actress Debra Paget, a rising Hollywood talent known for her striking dark hair, graceful presence, and calm personality. Many fans believed that Elvis could win the heart of any woman he wanted. He was charming, respectful, generous, and deeply romantic. But when he met Debra, something felt different to him. He did not just admire her beauty. He felt something serious and sincere. During the filming, Elvis treated her with old-fashioned manners. He brought flowers. He visited her family home. He showed interest not only in her as a star, but as a person. Those who watched them together said Elvis was truly smitten. For a young man who had millions of screaming fans, this kind of deep affection was rare and special. He even spoke openly about marriage. But what seemed like a perfect Hollywood love story did not end the way people expected. Decades later, when Debra reflected on that time in her life, she calmly explained that she did care for Elvis, but her heart was not free in the way he hoped. She had strong family guidance, personal beliefs, and other emotional influences shaping her decisions. For Elvis, this rejection was painful. He was not used to hearing no, especially when he was offering something as serious as marriage. The moment became one of the most talked about what-if stories in entertainment history. Fans still wonder how different things might have been if Debra had accepted his proposal. Would Elvis's life have taken another path? Would his personal struggles have been lighter? These questions remain part of the mystery. What is clear is that this was not just a simple teenage romance. It was a meeting of two powerful forces in American culture. One was the future king of rock and roll. The other was a young actress shaped by discipline, family control, and the demanding studio system of Hollywood. Their short connection became a lasting legend, not because it lasted, but because it did not. Sometimes the stories that end quickly leave the deepest marks. And for Elvis, many believe that Debra Paget was one of those unforgettable marks on his heart, a memory that stayed with him long after the cameras stopped rolling and the music faded into history. Before she ever met Elvis, Debra Paget was already living a life that was very different from most young girls her age. Born in 1933 as Deborah Lee Griffin, she grew up in a family that believed strongly in show business. Her mother, who had once been involved in acting, was determined to guide her daughter into Hollywood success. From the time Debra was a small child, her days were filled with dance lessons, acting practice, voice training, and strict supervision. There was very little room for a normal childhood. While other children played freely, Debra was preparing for auditions and learning how to present herself in front of adults who would judge her talent and appearance. This early pressure shaped her personality in deep ways. She became disciplined, polite, and careful with her words. She understood from a young age that her image mattered. When she signed a contract with 20th Century Fox as a teenager, it felt like a dream coming true, but it also meant entering a world where powerful studio executives controlled nearly every part of her life. The studio system during that era was strict. Young actors were often told what to wear, how to speak, who to date, and even how to smile in public. Debra quickly learned that beauty could open doors, but it could also limit opportunities. Because of her dark hair and unique features, studios often described her as exotic, a word that sounded flattering but also placed her into narrow types of roles. She was cast as Native American, Middle Eastern, or other ethnic characters, even when those roles were not historically accurate. To fit those parts, she sometimes had to darken her skin and wear uncomfortable contact lenses. These changes were physically unpleasant and emotionally confusing for a teenager who was still discovering her own identity. Despite these challenges, Debra remained professional and serious about her craft. She worked alongside much older actors and handled scenes that required emotional maturity beyond her years. Many critics praised her beauty, but fewer recognized her effort and skill. Behind the glamorous photos and movie posters, she often felt that she was being shaped into an image rather than allowed to grow naturally as a person. This background helps explain why her later choices in love and life were not simple or impulsive. By the time she met Elvis on the set of Love Me Tender, she was not just a young actress meeting a rising singer. She was already someone who understood how powerful fame could be and how easily it could control a person's future. Her careful upbringing and strict family environment would soon play a major role in one of the most important decisions of her life: the decision to say no to one of the most famous men in the world. When Debra Paget met Elvis Presley in 1956 on the set of Love Me Tender, both of them were standing at important turning points in their careers. Debra was already an established actress in Hollywood, known for films like Broken Arrow and the epic The Ten Commandments, directed by Cecil B. DeMille. Elvis, on the other hand, was exploding into fame as a music sensation. His songs were climbing the charts, and his performances were causing excitement across America. Yet despite his rising fame, Elvis was still shy in many ways, especially around women he truly admired. When he saw Debra, he was deeply impressed. People who worked on the film later said that Elvis treated her differently from others. He was polite, respectful, and almost nervous. Instead of acting like a superstar, he behaved like a young man trying to win the approval of someone very important to him. He visited her family home, brought gifts, and showed sincere interest in her background and beliefs. Elvis was raised with strong Southern values, and when he cared about someone, he thought seriously about marriage. He was not playing games. He believed Debra might be the woman he could build a life with. However, Debra's situation was complicated. Her mother was very protective and closely managed her career and personal life. In that time, family approval was extremely important, especially for a young woman in Hollywood. Debra later explained that her mother did not approve of Elvis as a suitable husband. At that moment, Elvis was seen by many older adults as wild and unpredictable because of his music and stage movements. Rock and roll was still new and controversial. To conservative families, it did not represent stability. Beyond her mother's influence, Debra was also connected to powerful Hollywood figures, including the wealthy and controlling businessman Howard Hughes. Hughes was known for taking special interest in young actresses, and his presence in Debra's life created additional pressure and complexity. Whether her feelings were divided or simply cautious, Debra ultimately decided not to accept Elvis's proposal. For Elvis, the rejection was deeply painful. He was not used to losing someone he cared about. Friends later suggested that he never completely forgot her. Some fans even noticed similarities between Debra and the woman Elvis later married, Priscilla Presley, pointing out their dark hair and delicate features. While it is impossible to know exactly what Elvis felt in his heart, the story of this lost romance became part of Hollywood legend. It was not filled with public arguments or scandal. Instead, it was quiet and personal, which in some ways made it even more powerful. Two young stars met at a special moment in time. One offered his heart fully. The other, guided by family, faith, and caution, chose a different path. That single decision changed the direction of their lives forever. After turning down Elvis Presley, the life of Debra Paget did not suddenly become simple or peaceful. In many ways, her world grew even more complicated. Hollywood in the 1950s was glamorous on the surface, but behind the bright lights there were power struggles, private pressures, and emotional confusion. One of the most talked about influences in Debra's life during that time was the powerful and mysterious billionaire Howard Hughes. Hughes was known not only for his aviation achievements and film production empire, but also for his intense interest in young actresses. He had money, influence, and the ability to shape careers. For a young woman trying to survive in a competitive industry, his attention could feel both protective and overwhelming at the same time. Reports over the years suggested that Hughes admired Debra deeply and offered her gifts and opportunities. However, his personality was known to be controlling. Many historians believe that being connected to such a powerful man may have limited her freedom in ways that were not always visible to the public. While it would be unfair to describe her choices as purely strategic, it is also true that relationships in classic Hollywood were rarely simple love stories. Careers, contracts, publicity, and reputation were always involved. At the same time, Debra herself was experiencing inner conflict. She had spent her teenage years playing romantic roles opposite much older actors. She had been photographed and admired for her beauty since she was barely an adult. Yet inside, she longed for stability and meaning. She later spoke openly about feeling uncomfortable when she realized she had become a pin-up figure for teenage boys. That attention, instead of making her feel powerful, made her feel objectified. She wanted to be respected not just as a beautiful face, but as a serious actress and a person with values. In the years that followed, Debra entered several marriages, including unions with singer David Street, director Bud Boeticher, and later businessman Ling Si-Kung. Some of these marriages were very short, lasting only months. To outsiders, this pattern looked like romantic instability. But when viewed more closely, it can also be seen as a search for safety and belonging in a life that had never truly been private. Growing up under constant supervision, public attention, and studio control can make it difficult to build lasting relationships. Many child stars have faced similar struggles. Eventually, Debra made a dramatic decision that surprised Hollywood. She stepped away from acting at the height of her recognition. Instead of chasing more fame, she chose a quieter life centered on faith and personal reflection. She became deeply involved in Christianity and later appeared on the Trinity Broadcasting Network, sharing her beliefs and experiences. This shift showed a side of her that fans had rarely seen. The glamorous film star transformed into a woman focused on spiritual growth and peace. In contrast, Elvis's life moved in the opposite direction, becoming more intense and pressured as the years passed. Their paths, once briefly connected on a movie set, now traveled in completely different directions. And yet, the memory of what might have been continued to follow both of them, kept alive by fans who never stopped wondering how one decision in 1956 shaped two very different destinies. As the years passed, the story of Debra Paget and Elvis Presley slowly turned into one of Hollywood's most fascinating what-if legends. Elvis went on to become not just a singer, but a global icon. His music, movies, and stage performances made him one of the most recognized faces in the world. He later married Priscilla Presley, whom he met while stationed in Germany during his military service. Many fans over the decades noticed something striking. Priscilla and Debra shared certain physical similarities: dark hair, pale skin, delicate features, and a soft, graceful presence. Debra herself once commented on the resemblance, saying they could have looked like sisters. This observation added another emotional layer to the story. Some people began to believe that Elvis never truly forgot Debra, and that perhaps, in some quiet part of his heart, he searched for her image again. Whether this idea is romantic imagination or psychological truth, it became part of the public narrative surrounding Elvis's personal life. What makes this story powerful is not drama or scandal, but emotion. Elvis was a man surrounded by constant attention. Women admired him everywhere he went. Yet the one woman he seriously considered marrying during his early rise to fame did not choose him. Rejection, especially for someone used to admiration, can leave a deep mark. Friends of Elvis later described him as sensitive and easily hurt beneath his confident stage presence. It is possible that Debra's refusal stayed with him longer than most people realized. At the same time, Debra's life followed a very different path. She did not continue chasing Hollywood fame into old age. Instead, she stepped back from the spotlight and focused on faith, family, and a quieter existence. In interviews later in life, she spoke calmly and without regret about her decisions. She did not describe her choice as dramatic or shocking. To her, it was simply the right decision at the time. That contrast is important. While fans often imagine grand emotional heartbreak, Debra viewed the situation through the lens of values, parental respect, and personal belief. In the end, the story teaches something deeper about fame and human emotion. Even the most famous people experience disappointment. Even the most admired stars can feel ordinary heartbreak. The world may see glamour, but behind it are real choices and real consequences. The brief connection between Debra Paget and Elvis Presley remains memorable not because it lasted, but because it ended. It reminds us that history is shaped not only by the events that happen, but also by the paths never taken. And sometimes, the quiet no, spoken behind closed doors, can echo louder than the applause of an entire world. Looking back from the distance of many decades, the story of Debra Paget and Elvis Presley feels less like gossip and more like a reflection of how powerful forces shape young lives. In the 1950s, both of them were very young, standing at the edge of enormous fame. They were not yet the legends history would later create. They were simply two people trying to understand love, family expectations, career pressure, and personal identity. When Elvis proposed marriage, he was acting from emotion and sincerity. He believed strongly in romance and traditional commitment. He often spoke about wanting a stable home life, something steady that fame could not always give him. Debra, however, was guided by a different set of influences. Her mother's authority was strong. Her career was still fragile. The Hollywood system was strict and sometimes unforgiving. Accepting a proposal from a rising rock and roll star, especially one considered controversial by conservative families, was not a small decision. It carried social risk and professional uncertainty. In that era, reputation mattered deeply, especially for young actresses. Debra chose caution and family obedience over passion. That decision did not make headlines at the time in the dramatic way it might today, but it quietly shaped two lives. Elvis moved forward, building an empire of music and film success. Yet as his fame grew, so did the pressures around him. His later years were marked by intense work schedules, personal struggles, and health problems. Many biographers have written about his loneliness despite worldwide admiration. While it would be too simple to connect all of that to one early rejection, emotional moments in youth can leave long shadows. Meanwhile, Debra stepped away from the very system that had created her stardom. Her transition into religious life and public faith broadcasting showed a desire for meaning beyond applause. She did not chase interviews to retell the Elvis story in a dramatic way. Instead, she spoke about it with calm honesty, explaining that she followed her conscience and family guidance. That quiet dignity has kept public respect around her name. The lasting power of their story comes from contrast. Elvis became louder, larger, almost mythical. Debra became quieter, more private, and spiritually focused. One continued in the spotlight until his early death in 1977. The other lived into her 90s, reflecting peacefully on a life that moved from fame to faith. When people today look back at that brief romance during the filming of Love Me Tender, they see more than a celebrity relationship. They see a moment when two different paths crossed and then separated forever. It reminds us that even in worlds filled with bright lights and screaming fans, the most important decisions are often made in quiet living rooms, guided by family, belief, and personal values. And sometimes, the greatest impact in history comes not from the love stories that succeed, but from the ones that gently, firmly, and permanently say goodbye to in the end. The story of Debra Paget and Elvis Presley remains powerful because it feels human. It is not filled with scandal, betrayal, or dramatic public fights. Instead, it is built on something simple and relatable, a young man offering his heart and a young woman choosing a different path. When people hear that even Elvis, one of the most desired men in the world, faced rejection, it reminds them that fame does not protect anyone from emotional pain. At the time, Elvis was rising fast. His music was changing culture. His performances were bold and exciting. Young fans adored him, while older generations sometimes criticized him. In that moment of rapid success, he may have hoped that marriage would bring stability and comfort. Debra represented something graceful and calm in his life. She was soft-spoken, respectful, and raised with traditional values. To Elvis, she may have seemed like the perfect partner who could balance the chaos around him. But Debra's world was also shaped by strong control and careful planning. Her mother had guided every step of her career. Hollywood contracts were strict. Public image mattered greatly. Choosing to marry a controversial rock and roll star could have changed everything. Beyond that, Debra's own heart and beliefs were complex. She was thoughtful and serious about life decisions. Saying no was not about hurting Elvis. It was about protecting what she believed was right at that time. As history moved forward, Elvis's life became legendary, filled with triumph and tragedy. He passed away in 1977, leaving behind music that still inspires millions. Debra, on the other hand, lived quietly into old age, speaking gently about her experiences. She did not describe the proposal as shocking or dramatic. She treated it as one chapter among many. Yet fans continue to revisit this story because it represents possibility. What if she had said yes? Would Elvis have found more stability earlier? Would their shared life have softened the pressures that later surrounded him? No one can truly answer those questions. What we can see clearly is that both of them were very young, making serious choices in a world that was watching closely. Their brief connection during the filming of Love Me Tender became a lasting part of entertainment history, not because it was loud, but because it was quiet and sincere. Sometimes the most meaningful stories are not about what happened, but about what almost happened. And in that quiet space between proposal and refusal, between love and goodbye, the legend of Elvis Presley and Debra Paget continues to live on in the imagination of fans around the world. As time continues to pass, the story of Debra Paget and Elvis Presley has taken on the feeling of a gentle historical lesson about youth, pressure, and destiny. When we look back at the 1950s, it is easy to see only the glamour, the black and white photographs, the elegant movie premieres, the screaming fans at concerts. But behind those images were very young people making life-changing decisions without the wisdom of age. Debra was in her early 20s when Elvis proposed. Elvis himself was only in his early 20s as well. They were not the larger-than-life legends they later became. They were young, emotional, hopeful, and surrounded by adults who had strong opinions about their futures. In that era, family influence was powerful, especially for young women in Hollywood. Debra respected her mother deeply. Obedience and reputation were important values in her upbringing. Choosing to reject Elvis was not simply rejecting a man, it was choosing stability, safety, and parental approval over risk and passion. At the same time, Elvis was experiencing the fast rise of fame. His concerts created chaos. His music challenged social norms. Some people saw him as exciting and modern, while others viewed him as dangerous and rebellious. For a cautious family, that image created concern. From today's point of view, Elvis is remembered as a cultural icon and musical legend. But in 1956, his long-term future was not guaranteed. Rock and roll was still new. No one knew how long the craze would last. Debra's decision, when viewed in that context, becomes easier to understand. It was a practical choice.